Good morning. Every time that I get my car worked on, whether it's mine or my kids or my wife's car, every time I get a car worked on, I always like to know what are they doing? And two, how is it all function together? Whether I go over to my buddy's house and he's helping me fix a car, or I go to a shop or whatever, I always like being out on the shop floor and asking, how does that all work? When it comes to the family or it comes to the church, we have the same questions, right? Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday, where today we're going to talk about God's will and how the family should all function together and how our church should also function together. So let's dive right in, all right? Well, today I want to talk about how everything works together and how we come together and do these things together. I'm going to start with talking about God's will, and this will be an abbreviated moment that I may go into more later. And so, but to start with, let's just talk about, what does God want from our lives? What does He want? Well, first of all, He wants us to be saved. Saved from what? Saved from our sin and the results of our sin that lead to an eternal separation from God or spiritual death. He wants to save us from that. We're already on the road to that spiritual death. He has given us an off-ramp in order to do something different, and that is in Jesus Christ. The second thing that He wants from every one of our lives, He wants us to be, and this is the big word, sanctified. This is a word that you don't hear very often, but it's about being perfected. It is getting better and better and better, being more like Jesus today than last week, and more like Jesus this month than last month, more like Jesus this year than last year. There's supposed to be a progression. It's not, I get to this level and I'm good. See, too many times I find people just stopping. They get to a certain level and they think that they have arrived. We have not arrived until we get to heaven. We're always supposed to be getting better. We can't continue to make excuses for our behavior, our attitudes, our gossip, our issues, our complaining, our whining, we can't continue. We have to continue to be better and better and be more like Jesus. So the first thing God wants from every person is that He wants us to be saved from ourselves. Secondly, He wants us to become more and more like Jesus. Now, here's one that's going to throw you for a loop, and the reason why I might have to do this in an expanded version later. His will is that we suffer. Whoa, wait a minute. No. What do you mean suffer? Being a Christian, I'm not supposed to suffer. Well, it's interesting that Hebrews tells us that for the joy set before Him, Jesus went to the cross. He suffered. Paul would write and he would say, I want to suffer like Jesus. Why? Why would you want? And James says, hey, find joy in the troubles and the suffering, that you have joy in the trials. Well, God would allow for us to suffer, one, because of what it produces in us. And secondly, I think He allows us and wants us to suffer because of what it produces through us. We grow as an individual through the suffering. We also become a model of the gospel, and we prove what it is we say we claim as we go through the suffering. And then finally, He wants us to serve. He wants us to serve. Now, in this idea of serving is where we get to today. These 6 ways that you're going to find yourself serving God. How does it all work together? Well, you're going to probably fit in one of these 6 categories and that I've developed to help us understand. 2 weeks ago, I talked about the family zoo. Well, that comes back into play today as we talk about how does that really function? How does it play out? How do things how do they all fit together? And what's the balance and all these things? And so let's talk about that, okay? All right, first of all, there are 6 categories that I'm going to share with you. Some of you may have read about spiritual gifts. You can go back and read in Romans chapter 12, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Ephesians chapter 4, and each of these talk about this thing called a gifting, a spiritual gifting. The Holy Spirit gives you these gifts. We can call it an ability. We can talk about passions or talents, and all of these things come together. And I have redeveloped it into one of 6 because it's easy to get lost in all of the 24. Are there 16 gifts, 20 gifts, 24 gifts? Is there an innumerable? What is it? Well, I think when you start to come together with your personality type, your passions, your interests, your gifts, your talents, and all of these things together, I think it pretty much brings us to these 6. And I'd be interested to know which one of these is you. And I think what you're going to find is in your family, you're going to have a variety of these things because some of them complement others. In our church, we need all 6. We can't all be one thing because we don't get it accomplished. God has provided to the church. Now, albeit that we have honored God and brought these people together and we hold on to them. Now, if we ostracize people, if we run people off, if by whatever reason we are causing people to leave, we are hurting ourselves because we may be losing out on some of these very important aspects that we need to be a well-rounded and balanced group of people. In your family, you don't have the same option. So you have to learn how to manage that and balance those things. So let's talk about these 6. And then I'd love to hear back from you in the comment section. Hey, this is what that's me. I'm that or whatever. All right, you ready? All right, here we go. Number 1, we have what I call the motivator. The motivator. The motivators are, if you remember the family zoo, these are your lion types. These are the people that are managers and leaders and supervisors and captains and coaches of teams. Most of the time, the captain of the team is going to be a motivator style of person. You think of Moses here. You think of Joshua. You think of John the Baptist. These were motivator types. These are very verbal heavy kind of people. They can be high strung people. They can be high energy kinds of people. Now, there are sometimes people get put into motivator type positions at work, but they don't have a motivator personality. And you wonder why are we struggling? I had a wonderful, godly man, friend of mine in church. He was a servant of God. He was awesome, and I really loved him. He was made chairman of the deacons one year, and it was a real struggle for him. Why? Because he was not the motivator type of person. And he struggled with that. The deacon struggled with that. He struggled with that. And because he said, I just want to serve, but he wasn't necessarily a motivator kind of person. This has been years ago. He had a different personality. And so we had to go back and think about that. Same thing happens in our families, at work, maybe in your school group. You're in a study group and you wonder why, why were they made chairman of the group? Why are they in charge? This may be why. So these kind of people, motivating kind of people, you know who I'm talking about, those motivational speakers, they're bigger than life and they're super excited and all of these other things. I'm a motivator kind of person. I don't always follow up on the details of things. Hey, that's just reality. It's not an excuse. I'm not strong ask my wife anytime. I would rather paint the big picture, the big wall, and let somebody else come by and do the trim. Because that's detail work and it's tedious to me and it's difficult for me. I'll paint the big strokes. Now I've learned to come back through and do the cutting in, and I've learned how to do that. And I'm not bad at it, but I'm not as good as my wife. Why? Because my wife has a different personality than me. And she does that. Now, neither one of us like doing it. She's just better at it. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. So, motivator types of people. That's what's one type of person. Are you a motivator type of person? If you are, then step up. You need to lead out. You need to get out front, and we together need to have it. Everybody needs a motivator in their life. Every church needs a motivator. You need a motivator at work. If you have a room full of people and nobody's the motivator, you're not going to get a whole lot done. And in fact, everybody's gonna suffer as a result of not having somebody that keeps saying, "Let's go here." All right, secondly, a provider. A provider. Some people are providers. These are the ones who they do the actionable work. I try to make this real simple. They provide what people need. These can be a mixture. If you remember the family zoo, this can be a mixture of beavers and retrievers, the details and the loyalty. These are people that feel things deeply and want to make sure that you are provided for, that you are that you have the things that you need. Helps and service and mystery things, healings, miracle, whatever the biblical terms that may have used there. That's these kinds of people. So who are these? These are the doers. These are our medical personnel. Nurses tend to be providers. You ask who really does the work in the hospital. You see, the doctors get all the glory, but the nurses do all the work. Okay, they really do. Now, I love my doctor, but the nurses do the bulk of the work because why? They're a provider. They are the ones who provide. Now, doctors do the same thing, but nurses a little bit stronger, a little bit more in this area. Your skilled worker, your trade skill workers, your aides in the classroom that are doing so many different things. These are the ones who are provider types of people. I think of Phoebe in the scriptures. I think of Martha in the scriptures. Very much a provider type. The people that Paul will list and thank in Romans 16. These are people that are provider people. They do things sometimes behind the scenes, but they are just, they're making sure that everybody gets the things that they need. Maybe you're on the facilities team. Maybe you are, maybe you're fellowship or flower team or tech team or the celebration team, the counting team. These are people that provide. These are people that just do the things that are necessary. And they don't get a lot of glory. They don't get a lot of the limelight, not a lot of the spotlight. And this is just what they get. So the third kind is an energizer. Now, not to be confused with the Energizer Bunny. That's not what I'm talking about. These people, these do a lot of the caring kind of work. They energize other people. Now, this gets confusing only in this regard. Sometimes we confuse a motivator with an energizer. Here's the difference. The motivator is absolutely comfortable being in front of a bunch of other people. An energizer, less so. They're not as comfortable in front, but they're the kind that will come up to you, put their hand on the shoulder, and in 6 words can just really refuel you. Encouragers, energizers, the kind that come through and just bring energy to this mind. These are in the family zoo. These are your retriever types. They serve well in this role. Barnabas, the name means son of encouragement. Mary, as she anointed Jesus' feet, energizing that moment. It doesn't have to be high energy. It just means that they are bringing a sense of energy and encouragement to your soul and to your spirit. We know people like this. Sometimes we have them in our family. And the motivators have to be careful not to overdo it. And harm some of these, but the motivators, the providers, the energizers, these are all 6 are very important. And so these are our first 3 so far today. Energizers are people that serve on our greeting team. They welcome people. They serve in baptismal ministry, hospital ministry. Energizers are wonderful hospital visitation people because they go and they energize. And we need energizing, especially when people are in the hospital. So, fourth, solvers. You know. Who doesn't have a problem that needs solving? We all have problems that need solving, but that sometimes can take some tedious kind of work. And sometimes it takes some very detailed work. Motivators can share the vision. Motivators can share the solution, but solvers are the ones who need to come up with the solution. Are you seeing how some of this works together? Let's say you have a problem. The solvers will come up with a solution. Energizers are going to go and do the caring behind the scenes work to make sure that we're all on board with this together. Providers are going to make sure the needs and the resources are being met, and motivators are going to sell it to everybody. And motivators are going to stand up and go, let's go, here we go on. But we need all of these kinds of people if we're going to function well together. The reason why organizations, whether it's work organizations, church organizations, ball clubs, ball teams, whatever it may be, the reason why there is struggling sometimes is because we don't have these things being handled. We try to blend it. Well, you need to do all those things. People are not wired to do all these things. People are wired to do one, maybe two of these six. You've got to staff for these other things, whether it's volunteer or paid or part-time or full-time, whatever. We've got to make sure that we have a balance of these things. So solvers, these are people like Solomon. He had the wisdom, the knowledge, the discernment. He could solve the problems. You've got the judges in Exodus that would come and would help in this process, where some were over 1,000, some were over 100, some were over 10. You have the elders of Israel that were providing solutions. They were coming together and providing solutions for these kinds of situations. You've got researchers and actuaries and accountants and bookkeepers and engineers. These people solve problems, and this is what they do. They come up with solutions for a problem. Do you remember Apollo 13, the movie? And the famous scene where they've got a problem with the oxygen dropping. And the guy comes in, he throws a bunch of stuff down on the table, and he says, I need something in 6 hours or whatever. But we've got to come up with, these are the parts they have, come up with the solution. And they do. It's amazing. Motivators, providers, and encouragers would have never come up with that. Solvers come up with that. You got to have solvers. Why? Because we all have problems that need solving. Okay. So number 5, developers. Developer. I don't know if I spelled that right. Developer. These people will train and strengthen other people. They train and strengthen other people. This is their heartbeat. This is a beaver lion mixture of things, because they can take charge of a group of people, but they're detail oriented enough to make sure that you're following all the steps necessary to be all that you need to be. In the church world, we call these disciplers. These are people that will disciple, and they love it. Oh, they eat it up. They're absolutely fabulous at doing this. These are your educators. These are your trainers. These are your life coaches. These are your assistant coaches. I mean, think about it. You've got the head coach that is out there, and they're the ones that everything rises and falls with the head coach, right? But if you didn't have all the assistant coaches in the background doing the developmental work and the day-to-day work, the head coach is your motivator. But your assistant coaches are the developers. They're the ones training up these athletes in their specific needs of things. Head coach tends to be a motivator. And the head coach, the developers that become a head coach struggle. Why? Because they don't know how to handle a press conference. Look at the most recent head coach for the Jets. He has no idea what to do in front of a camera. You know, you go over to the Rams head coach, you look at his first press conference for the Rams, and man, he was on it. Why? Because he's a motivator. The guy over at the Jets, he fumbles through it. He didn't know why. He's not a motivator. It doesn't make him a bad head coach, but put somebody else in front of the camera. Here's the problem. The head coach, he's got to get in front of the camera. So you see some of the struggles that you can have if you get out of your lane. If you start to get out of your lane, it's not that you can't learn another skill, but there's a skill you're wired with by God. Do it. Get involved with it. Don't be envious of somebody else's skill. Do your skill to the best of your ability as God strengthens you to do it. And you're going to find that it's going to make your life more peaceful, everybody's life more peaceful, and your group that you're in more productive in the end. The final, you have a distributor. You have the distributors. These are the front lines of communities spreading the news. These are your salesmen. These are your marketers. These are your campaign solicitors. These are the door-to-door kind of people. You know, some people, they love going door to door. I mean, they can go door to door and they can sell ice to an Eskimo. Okay. I mean, if you know somebody, they're likely a distributor. They're likely a distributor because they are just good at that. These are the happy-go-lucky, fun-loving people. This is Philip. This is the younger brother. That's the risk. The younger brother in that story of the prodigal son. He's the younger brother. He can run off and he can get off into bad territory. This is why you need a developer. This is why you need energizers. This is why you need motivators to make sure that we all come together and work together in doing this. So distributors, man, they're all about outreach. They're about evangelism. They're follow-up. They're missions. They're all these kinds of things. We need all of these kinds of people. What happens is motivators like motivators and energizers gather together and they like energizers. But the reality simply is this. In my own home, we have a motivator, we have a developer, we have a solver, and we have a provider. We have all these kinds of things in my own home. And so we have to learn to work together, realize each other's strengths and weaknesses, complement one another so that we as a family can reach the highest marks intended for us and from us by God. The same is true at your own work. At your job, you need all these kinds of people. Now, you may not be in a position to make it better. You may not be in a position to solve the problems, but at least you may be more aware of why there are struggles in the workplace. Maybe you're lacking some of these things. Maybe you don't have all of these kinds of people, and this is why there's a struggle in the workforce, in church. We need all of these. You need all of these. And we cannot say, well, one is better than the other. In fact, Paul says, hey, look, one's not better than the other. God gave some to be this and some to be that and some to be the other. But we're all to work together for the common good of loving God and loving our neighbor. This is what we are called to. And we have to come together and be unified together and realize we all have different strengths. And instead of calling each other out on what you can't do, let's complement one another and work together for the common good of how we can work together for God's glory, kingdom's work, and our own benefit in the end. Motivators, providers, energizers, solvers, developers, and distributors. Which one are you? I'd love to continue this conversation in our chat. Thank you for being with me on Whiteboard Wednesday. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you at Dad's with Coffee in the morning.